Hi everyone, my name's Mia and I want to tell you a little bit about childcare workers and the low wages and poor benefits that these individuals face. Alright, so first I want to start by taking a step back and looking at the year of 2020. You may remember this year. It was the year of the pandemic. So all of a sudden we all had masks in our pocket and online grocery shopping really seemed to take flight during this time. Well, while many of us got the opportunity to stay inside and avoid all illnesses, there were a few occupations that were labeled as essentials. For example, police officers, firefighters, doctors, nurses, and a handful more. One occupation that you may not be aware that was labeled as an essential is childcare workers. Childcare just so happens to be one of those occupations that robots and automated systems will never be able to take over. There will always be a need for human connection and physical, hands-on guidance in early childhood education. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis states that 19% of adults in the U.S. have young children. That is 24.4 million people. To work, they need access to childcare, whether that may be formal or informal. It plays a vital role in keeping the working economy going. Yet childcare workers are faced with low wages and limited benefits. These challenges have led to a high turnover rate and a staffing shortage in the field of early childhood education. As a childcare provider with 12 employees, I am extremely familiar with the struggles that low wages place on my staff. Many of them have remained in the field of childcare due to the fact that they are single moms and would not be able to afford care for their children in a different field. The Economic Policy Institute states that 1 in 7 childcare workers live in families with income below the official poverty line. With Christmas right around the corner, I've heard many of the women at my facility expressing their worries about being able to afford gifts for their children this holiday season. And I truly feel for them. Holidays can be extremely difficult and daunting when you're barely making ends meet. Yet, after further investigation, I have come across a potential solution to this never-ending battle. One promising approach I've identified is consistent government funding. Even a small yearly allowance would allow us to support higher wages. In the past, we have received government funding, but the challenge comes when we raise those wages based on the funding, and then the funding ends or it isn't renewed. When that happens, we're left unable to maintain those higher wages because of our already extremely high operating costs. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that the average hourly wage for childcare workers is $15.41. People who work in childcare are oftentimes paid less than parking lot attendants. Currently, 60% of my employees only get paid $15 to $16 an hour, which unfortunately is not a livable wage in today's economy. And while we do not offer traditional benefits, we do provide them with the benefit of free childcare. This singular benefit is extremely valuable considering that infant care at the facility that I run is $270 per week. That is $1,080 per month. For many of my employees, free childcare is the leading reason as to why they remain in the early education field. I believe that qualifying licensed childcare centers with low tuition rates and a certain number of employees should receive yearly government funding. This funding would allow us to increase wages. However, I believe that the government funding should come with clear restrictions, such as requiring that 80% of the funding is directly spent on payroll. This ensures that the childcare centers are using the funding appropriately and that the money is truly benefiting the workforce. Not only would this funding help stabilize the workforce, but it would also create a higher quality programs due to the potential decrease in our turnover rate. These shortages affect the industry in multiple ways. They reduce the availability and supply of childcare and also create greater insustainability for children's relationships with their teachers when turnover is high, says the Century Foundation. Urban Institute states that by investing more in childcare, policymakers could help more parents work without having to worry about their children, support children's healthy development, and help employers maintain their workforce and work towards a healthier economy. Something else that I deem as a potential fix would be providing childcare funds to families regardless of their income. This approach would allow facilities like mine to increase tuition and in return increase the wages of our childcare workers. Over the past year, I have observed a handful of employers are now giving their employees financial support for childcare, which has been extremely beneficial and has allowed us to increase our tuition by $10 in our infant and toddler program in 2024, and ultimately has allowed us to give a small raise to the employees. The raise was not high enough to bring them over the poverty line, but it was just enough to be beneficial in their daily lives. Now that we're on the topic of low wages and the childcare workforce, you're potentially trying to brainstorm your own solutions. When discussing this concern with other individuals, a few common ideas have been reoccurring. One being increasing tuition prices. Yet, increasing tuition ultimately creates another issue. The cost of childcare is already extremely high, so raising our tuition means potentially losing the families in our care. The more families we lose, the less revenue we make. But operation costs still remain the same, so with less income and the same expenses, it becomes even more difficult to pay our employees those higher wages that they absolutely deserve. Another alternative solution that you may be considering is to increase the minimum wage as a whole. Yet, this solution also seems to come with some rising concerns. Hiring the minimum wage would mean an increase in tuition, but it would also increase our working capital. Food prices would go up, so the cost of feeding our children would increase. Gas prices would go up, so now our transportation cost is increasing, and eventually our rent would go up too. So theoretically, they wouldn't be making much more if the cost of living would also be increasing. Due to this reason, I deem government funding to qualifying childcare centers or providing funding to families who have children in childcare centers so we can raise tuition prices without causing harm elsewhere as the best solution when it comes to tackling this ongoing issue of a high turnover rate among childcare workers. The director of a childcare center in Ohio states, "Not being able to pay quality staff what they are worth will be the downfall of early learning programs." Childcare is essential to keeping the economy up and running, yet childcare workers are underpaid and facilities are unable to increase these wages due to high operating expenses and minimal to no funding or support from the government. We need the government to recognize the importance of early education centers and provide some sort of constant support in order to uphold quality childcare facilities and decrease the staff turnover rate. Thank you.